Tonight's story is about the ownership trail of the Voynich manuscript, not as a coded challenge, but as a quiet procession of collectors, libraries, letters, and rare book rooms through which one unusual book passed from hand to hand. Not a race to decipher, not an argument over what the script must mean. Only vellum pages, marginal notes, imperial collections, booksellers, and the calm documentary trail of possession. The book itself comes first, a manuscript on vellum, bound, handled, catalogued, and passed along. However strange its writing may appear, the ownership story is grounded in ordinary book history. Someone acquired it, someone stored it, someone listed it, someone sent a letter about it. A manuscript can be unusual in content and still very calm in provenance. Book first, shelf first, ownership before interpretation. Again, book first, shelf first, ownership before interpretation. Name Voynich points to Wilfred Voynich, the bookseller who acquired the manuscript in the 20th century and whose surname became attached to it. This is already a restful beginning because booksellers belonged to rooms of paper, inventory, correspondence, and quiet trade. Before the manuscript became a cultural symbol, it was an item in the world of rare books, physical volume changing custodians. Inventory, correspondence, book entering a dealer's hands. From there, the ownership trail extends backward through letters and collect traditions associated with figures such as Emperor Rudolf Roman II and the Jesuit scholar Athanasius Kircher. The backward movement is one of the gentlest parts of the story. Provenance work often proceeds through fragments, a note of sale, a mention in a letter, an inscription, a remembered association. It is less like unveiling and more like arranging papers on a table. Letter, note, association, paper beside paper until a trail begins to appear. Paper trail is the true bedtime subject. Rare books live by such trails. Bookplates, inventories, correspondence, ownership marks, auction notes, shelf numbers, and archival references all help a manuscript remain anchored in time. The Voynich manuscript, for all its reputation, also belongs to this quiet world of bibliographic care. Bibliographic care, quiet anchoring in time. Books staying connected to history through paper traces. Perspective softens the entire manuscript. One does not need to solve its script to appreciate its life as an object. The book has edges, binding pages, handling marks, and a route through collections. Those facts are sufficient for calm. The ownership trail becomes a human story of custody rather than a mental contest. Custody instead of contest. Handling instead of hype. The manuscript returned to the scale of rooms and hands. Imperial association with Rudolf Roman II adds another restful atmosphere. The cabinet, the court library, the collecting impulse of early modern Europe. Courts gathered paintings, instruments, books, curiosities, and learned objects as part of how they displayed and pursued knowledge. If the Voynich manuscript passed through that world, it did so as one more prized volume among many other strange and beautiful things. Cabinet world, court library, manuscript resting among other collected objects. Jesuit connection through Kircher adds another layer of calm because learned correspondence is one of the quietest genres in history. Letters move between scholars, questions are posed, texts are sent for inspection, opinions are offered, books travel with covering notes. The manuscript's ownership trail lies partly inside that epistolary world, which is almost entirely made of desks, ink, and patience. Desks, ink, that are folded and sent. Manuscript moving with scholarly courtesy. Again, desks, ink, that are folded and sent. Your book room is perhaps the sleepiest setting of all. Low light, controlled climate, shelves, boxes, a librarian or curator bringing out a volume carefully. The Voynich manuscript belongs to this environment as much as to legend. In such rooms, books are not magical objects, they are material witnesses. Their bindings, leaves, and ownership marks speak in small ways over long time. Rare book room, controlled quiet, volume resting in protective care. Care is part of the ownership story too. Ownership is never only possession, it is also stewardship. To keep a manuscript is to keep it from light, damp, mishandling, and oblivion. Librarians, collectors, dealers, and archivists all contribute to its continuity. The Voynich manuscript exists for modern readers because generations of such stewards kept it materially intact. Stewardship, continuity, book preserved by many cautious hands. This is a deep becoming thought. The manuscript's most certain history is one of preservation. Someone valued it enough to keep it, someone else valued it enough to pass it along. Another valued it enough to describe it, catalog it, or secure it. The chain of care matters more at bedtime than the chain of speculation. Chain of care, chain of custody, chain of memory. Again, chain of care, chain of custody, chain of memory. Manuscript script may remain debated, but the ownership trail reveals a different kind of meaning. It shows what kinds of people were drawn to unusual books: emperors, scholars, collectors, dealers, librarians. It shows the institutions through which books travel: courts, religious networks, private collections, book markets, libraries. That travel is almost enough to tell the whole story. Court, collection, market, library, one book moving through each world in turn. One imagines the manuscript at one quiet moment in its life. Let it be resting closed on a table after being shown to a prospective buyer or a curious scholar. The room is lined with books, a window gives soft light, a letter lies nearby. The book pages are not being solved, they are simply being handled as a valued object whose past is partly known and partly emerging through documentation. Closed book, soft light, letter nearby, documentation slowly brightening the edges of the past. There's another gentle pleasure in Provenance work too. It allows the imagination to move by ownership rather than by plot. Who had the book? Where did it sit? Through whose hands did it pass? Which library or collection sheltered it next? Each question leads not to climax but to another room, another desk, another shelf, another hand writing down what was there. Another room, another shelf, another hand writing the book in a record. That sequence is enough for sleep. If the story returns tonight, let it return in its simplest form. Vellum pages, collector's shelf, archival letter. Again, vellum pages, collector's shelf, archival letter. And once more, book, owner, next owner. The Voynich manuscript can finally rest not as a challenge hurled at the mind, but as a rare book moving through time with surprising gentleness. A manuscript named for one owner but shaped by many, a chain of collectors and stewards, a quiet bibliographic life inside a loud public reputation. At the center of it all, a book kept carefully enough that its ownership trail still offers a calm path through history for anyone willing to follow it slowly. There's another calm layer in the story if one lingers with the physical signs of ownership. A note on the first page, a shelf mark, a bookseller's memory of acquisition, a letter sent to a scholar. These are small traces, but provenance often depends on precisely such smallness. One manuscript remains itself, while these marks gather around it like a second text. Ownership by the second text. Mark beside mark. Record beside record. Again, ownership by the second text. Mark beside mark. Record beside record. Manuscript therefore lives in two reading traditions at once. One tradition peers at the script and drawings, the other follows hands, shelves, and sales. Bedtime belongs firmly to the second tradition. It is quieter, more documentary, and less demanding. Who housed the book? Who mentioned it? Who moved it from one institution or collection to another? These questions lead through rooms rather than puzzles. Through rooms rather than puzzles. Through shelves rather than codes. Through correspondence rather than conjecture. Their book culture makes these rooms easy to imagine. Cabinets open softly, volumes wrapped or sported, lists of holdings written in careful script, dealers writing letters to prospective buyers or scholarly contacts, librarians entering acquisitions into records. The Voynich manuscript belongs to this physical culture of stewardship. Cabinet, record book, soft handling of volume with a long past. Figure of Wilfred Voynich becomes especially common in this frame. He is not only the name attached to the manuscript, he is part of the world of books as objects circulating through market and scholarship. Booksellers stand between private possession and public knowledge. They identify, describe, negotiate, and connect. Through them, books change social worlds without changing their material identity. Private collection, dealer's table, library or scholar next. Transition from one social world to another is one of the quiet beauties of book history. A manuscript may rest for years in one collection, then reappear in a dealer's hands, then enter a library where it is cataloged differently and seen by new readers. The book itself keeps moving through institutional atmospheres. Ownership becomes a map of such atmospheres. Collection, dealer, library, again, collection, dealer, library. Letters associated with earlier owners and contacts also deserve a longer pause. Letters are almost always sleep-safe artifacts, folded paper, formal dress, careful account of what is enclosed or requested. Through letters, manuscripts announce themselves gently. Voynich manuscript's ownership story reaches us through the epistolic quiet, which may be calmer than the manuscript's undeciphered pages themselves. Folded paper, formal greeting, book described from one desk to another. One final image is needed, let it be a rare book librarian returning the manuscript to storage after consultation. The table is clear, notes remain, the volume is supported properly and set back in place. The chain of care continues for one more day. That continuity, more than any unresolved question about the script, is what makes the ownership story so serene. There's another quiet pleasure in provenance. It allows time to be felt by custody rather than by event. One owner overlaps with a century, another with a court culture, another with a scholarly network, another with the rare book market. The manuscript passes through these atmospheres without needing to declare itself anew each time. The owners change, the book abides. Owners change, the book abides. Time felt by custody. Again, owners change, the book abides. Time felt by custody. Makes the manuscript almost monastic in its calm. It sits, it waits, it is taken out, inspected, discussed, returned, years pass. Another custodian repeats the pattern. The book's life is long because its motions are small. Shelf to table, table to shelf, collection to dealer, dealer to library. Such movements are enough to make a full history. Shelf to table, table to shelf, collection to dealer, dealer to library. There's also dignity in the fact that provenance work on is uncertainty without surrendering to vagueness. A like connection here, documented letter there, strong association in one period, a thin trail in another. The ownership story advances by degrees. This degree by degree movement is deeply sleep safe. It is almost the rare book version of walking quietly down a corridor of rooms. Degree by degree, room by room. Manuscript continuing through partial but careful record. If one final room is needed, let it be a cataloging desk. The manuscript lies open just enough for verification. Prior note is checked, current record is updated. The institution adds one more line to the chain of custody. Nothing dramatic happens, and yet history is preserved by exactly such moments. Cataloging desk, one more line entered. Custody extending gently into the future. That is enough to let the Voynich manuscript sleep as a book among books, quieter in ownership than in reputation, and beautifully sustained by the long, patient chain of people who kept it moving without ever letting it disappear. Book among books, care among years, custody continuing. Slowly, reliably, quietly, book many custodians and a paper trail calm enough to follow in his sleep. Carefully, with patient custody,